Welcome to the Education, Career, and Beyond podcast. We've combined life experience with young adult drive and ambition. Are you just starting to college plan? Did you finish your education and wonder, now what? Join us in this lively discussion about the topics you need to know to create the next stage of your life's dreams, careers, finances, education, and more. Brought to you by Voice for Heroes 501c3. Yes, welcome to another episode. It has been such a fun season. I have to tell you, I get more excited every week for the guests that are coming in and saying, we want to be a part of this and we want to help with our young adults and their families to have all the resources possible. Today's a little extra fun because we are a podcast today as we discuss podcasting, huge hot topic, and a lot of people are intrigued by it. Some are immersed in it. Some don't even understand it. We're going to talk about everything podcasting and what an incredible career opportunity that is for those that really feel that's where I want to be. We have Adam Adams with us, and he has a unique story behind where he's been, his experience in business and real estate as an investor. He has handled some really extensive things on the business side of the world and now has come over and brought all of that experience into podcasting. But I don't want to share his story. I'm going to let him do it. As always, we have Ed Sanderson, our amazing co-host, and Capri Suarez, who is getting packed up and ready to head back to Purdue in the next weeks. And Adam, thank you so much for being with us today. Welcome to the show.
Awesome to be here. I'm excited.
I was good to have you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Ed.
And this is where I shut up more, I promise. And you're going to hear from Ed and Capri. But Adam, first, just share with us your background because you have such an incredible background. And just briefly share with us that process of what led you here to us today.
Great. So I actually went to college for secondary education. My plan was to be a music teacher. And my stepdad, growing up, he always thought I should do real estate. And he said, pay yourself first, take 10% and do this, take 10% and do that. Very smart guy. And he's done well for himself, but I didn't want to listen to him. So I just didn't. And then one day in college, he bought me a piece of land. So it was really kind. I don't remember if it was a birthday present or a Christmas present, but he bought me a piece of land. And 2 years later, before graduating college, I got an offer to sell that land a little below what it was valued at, but just have a quick sale, all cash. And it was more than I would make in a first year of being a teacher. So after selling that land, I said yes. After selling the land, I never used my degree, randomly enough. I never used the degree. And I read a book that my stepdad told me to read. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a little purple book. And there's basically two takeaways. The first takeaway is Robert Kiyosaki, the author, made all of his money doing business. And the second big takeaway is that with all that money, he paid himself first. He did 10%. He put a lot into real estate investments. And so I decided before graduating that was what I was going to do. So I ended up doing property management. I thought that'd be a good way to learn real estate. And then I started a business. But it was right before the crash, by the way, right before the crash. So I started the business, and for a while I was netting $20,000 a month as a kid. I was stoked about it. And I said, this book is gold. And then it slowed down because of the crash, long story short. And I also owned an apartment building and lost it because of the crash. And so
I was in that crash too, Adam, just so you know. I was a wholesale mortgage rep, so I was right there with you.
I thought for a while that, I shouldn't do this. I'm scared to do this. Maybe I made the mistake. And there was probably things that I could do better. But I was thinking like that this is a scary world. I'm just going to work for somebody else. So I did. And my dad, got back, and my stepdad was like, you got to do this. And so in 2015 is when I really started, and I went complete full-time in real estate and just dropped everything else. And it was really tough. So anybody who's doing entrepreneurship, you should know that it takes time, it takes effort. You got to make sure you're doing bookkeeping, accounting. There's some expenses on top, and it takes usually most people some time before they're in the black. They're netting actual money. And so I did that, and it ended up doing pretty well. I got up to a position where I was a part owner Please don't think that I owned this by myself or that it was like my net worth or anything, but a part owner in $100 million of apartment buildings. And so it was kind of neat, kind of cool to kind of make that a success. In 2019, I thought there might be a crash again. And, I felt it, and I was like, there might be a crash again within the next 5 years. And so I pivoted and I sold my real estate podcast. I had a podcast on real estate. I sold that and I started just supporting other podcasters. So 2019 is kind of where I came to this. I have a company. It's called Grow Your Show. And right now we have 37 employees. And we've got almost 70 clients that have podcasts. And we do like the editing, post-production, and some marketing for them. And so that's really where I am today.
Wow. What a difference for you to leave real estate, and then come over to, or, leave it to some degree and over here in the podcasting world. Capri, I know she has some questions here. I'm going to pull your site up for everybody to see.
Okay, cool. Hey, Capri.
Hi. Of course. Ed and I always have so many questions for you. I'm just wondering, why did you decide to start podcasting? What encouraged you to do that?
I was a member of a thing called a mastermind, and I'm not sure if everybody knows what that is. So there's usually you pay for a group that you're a part of, and this was just business owners. And actually, I was probably the least successful person in the whole group. A lot of people were netting $1 million a month, and so there was just some really cool people in that group. And I let them know that, hey, I felt like there's probably going to be a crash, by 2024. And I don't want to be caught with my pants down. Basically, I don't want to purchase more property with other people's money and ended up like being in this crash and having to owe a lot of people money or feeling bad that I didn't do what was right. And so I just let them know that was it, but I didn't know what else I would do. Like, I don't know what's next. And the coach of the whole group said, you've helped so many people in this room and in his other groups with their podcasts. So I've helped a lot of people get top 1% rated podcasts, tons of listeners and stuff like that. So he's like, you've helped so many of us for free. You're obviously passionate about podcasting. Why don't you just serve podcasters? And I thought, no, he's right. I do love podcasting. I do kind of have a niche that some people don't see it the way that I do. I have a little bit of Asperger's. So basically what that means is I'm smart in some ways and dumb in others. But what the things that I'm kind of good at is seeing patterns. And so is able to figure out how to hack some algorithms within social media platforms and podcasting platforms to kind of get our shows ranked. And so they said, do that. And I go, oh, okay, I will, let me get started. And so I actually started 2 companies, one that helps people get virtual assistants. Cause I had, 30 plus VAs at the time, and another company that, I started that just helped podcasters. And I slowed down on the VA thing. We still have it. But I don't really advertise it as much because the podcasting thing, especially in 2020, I started this group in 2019. And in 2020, podcasting got so huge because of COVID and everybody starting them that my choice was I gotta slow down on this other thing and just go full bore here because so many people need that service. And so that's really kind of why I did it. It's this mastermind. And actually that's how I sold the other podcast that was on real estate. And so I was like, but what do I do about this? Cause it's like my baby, it's like my kid. I built it for 4 years. And, people are like, how many people are listening? I told him, and in that room, I got 3 offers above 50 grand to just hold so that they would just have the podcast. They felt it was that valuable. And so I was like, okay, cool. I departed from the show, that other show, and I went full bore into serving podcasters.
That's really incredible. I don't know. I still consider myself very new to the podcasting realm. Obviously we've been doing this show for almost 2 years, but I guess 1.5 years maybe, but I'm learning so much every day. So it's just incredible to see someone who has all that knowledge already.
Thank you. Yeah. You learn it by cutting your teeth on stuff. Sometimes some of it you learn the easy way, but most of it, I would say we learn the hard way.
Awesome.
Ed, you want me to go first?
Oh, sure. Go ahead. I wasn't sure if Capri was done.
Adam, what I love that you've just given us with your background and description, especially knowing who our audience is, that you showed this tremendous ability to say, I'm willing to take this new risk. I'm willing to evaluate this. It's coming out of that mindset of just, well, I chose this one thing and now I have to do that the rest of my life. You're really exhibiting that ability to really shift and change and do it boldly. How has that part of it been for you?
You know, speaking of the taking on risks and everything, there's a few different personality types. Some of us have done a DISC profile. Some of us might know what culture index or predictive index, and there's many, many more. They're personality profiles. And if you look at predictive index, there's 17 different personalities, and 3 of them, Maverick, which I am, and there's a couple more, Captain. These people are willing to take risks. They're willing to just, they're being pioneers, drop everything, and I'll figure it out somehow. And there's a few personalities that really don't want to take risks. They're calculated. They need to see it before they believe it. And I think this is interesting because I think it's beneficial for the person who's listening to understand that there's pros and cons on both. And so for me, it was very natural for me to like be willing to drop things and just go and figure it out as I did it. However, when you have that personality and you're kind of like, okay, not knowing every single thing, you will make probably more mistakes during the movement of going forward or up and down and jagged. Right. However, with the other personality profiles, they're less likely to become entrepreneurial. They're less likely to take those risks. But when they do, they're more calculated. And in many cases, they are more successful. So I think it's interesting if the listener is thinking, I'm one of those people, one of those, 3-ish personality profiles is absolutely afraid of this. You might be the best at it. You just have to get around to take the risk. You just have to put yourself out there. And if you're one of the personalities that, oh, this is easy, I'll just do it and I'll figure it out. Be careful, be careful, because think about, I think I mentioned this before, your bookkeeping, your taxes, and some other parts of it that can kind of bite you in the butt. I don't know if this is a cussing podcast or not. So it'll bite you in the butt if you do it wrong, if you go too fast, like that ready, fire, aim, and the ready, aim, fire. I've become, because I've been bit in the butt, I have the scars to prove it so many times, that I've become that person who more advocates for ready, aim, fire, but still take the risk, still move forward. And so to answer your question, I think it was easy for me to take that risk. And for me in the beginning, I didn't have children. Now I've got 2 boys. And when you've got the kids, you have to think about things a little bit differently. You have to, be cautious. And so I will share like another little takeaway. And this is that any type of starting a business is always going to be hard. And I think a mistake that a lot of people have made as they go with starting a podcast, starting a business, is that they try to do too many things at a time, or they only do something for a short amount of time. And I think that's a huge problem, because like I said before, it takes sometimes a year or 2 or 3 to get into the black. Sometimes it takes time to get that business to where it's really going, really generating and paying for itself. And the problem that I've seen with people that want to be entrepreneurs or start a podcast, for example, is they go and start it, but then it's like in 3 months, they haven't already seen, they're not millionaires after 3 months of starting their podcast or starting their business. And so they just throw up their hands and say, this does not work. I'm going to try something else. And then they chase a new shiny object. And then they try that for just a short amount of time also. And it gets hard. They get punched in the face one time and they think, I failed. Because in some ways, and Capri, you might agree with this, I believe that in many ways, and I think Robert Kiyosaki agrees with this if you read that book, education kind of teaches us that failure is bad, that if we fail, it's over, that we have to take that class over. We can't graduate, or our parents ground us. That's what failure means to a lot of people, because we kind of been conditioned about that. But ultimately, we have to understand that failure is like falling on a bike. Anybody who has ridden a bike and can ride a bike, you're going to have scars on your knee. You're going to have painful wrists. You're going to be embarrassed a little bit because you will fall. Because of getting back up and trying again, falling, getting back up and trying again, falling. It's the persistence and that determination on the same thing. You don't just say, you fall once on a bike, you say, that doesn't work, I'll try skateboarding. You fall once, I'll try parkour. You fall once, you say, I'll try gymnastics. You fall once, and you try soccer. And all of these things can be a problem, but you got to put in the 10,000 hours. You got to put in the time, the effort over a period of time and be, determined. And that's when magic happens. It's all a bell curve. And so to just have a takeaway, regardless if you are confident in it or you're reluctant to do it, it will work if you stay the same course. Mm-hmm. But if you're chasing a whole bunch of shiny objects or blaming things and saying this doesn't work, even though it worked for other people, it doesn't work anymore, or it doesn't work for girls, or it doesn't work for this color or that color, or older or younger, like those excuses are invalid. It will work for anybody as long as you stay the path.
Excellent.
If I can add something there, something that totally changed my perspective on like starting something and sticking with it, because I kind of am that second type where it's like, if I don't know how it goes, I don't really want to do it. But one of my teachers said, and it's kind of cringy, but you got to stick with it. But failing is just your first attempt in learning. And if you don't fall, you can never get back up again. And you can't climb a ladder without starting on the bottom. So sometimes you do have to start on the bottom, and you do have to step down off the ladder so you can move the ladder to a taller wall and climb it up.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Go Capri.
That was pretty good stuff.
That was pretty good stuff. Ed?
Adam, first let me tell you that I dig your name.
I would like to say that I named myself, but I kind of did. Short, quick story. I was born on a polygamous colony. My mom was the sixth wife. We won't get into big details on this, but I couldn't have Bio Dad's last name. I couldn't have Bio Dad's last name. And so when my mom left and we grew up like on our own, I was 5 years old and about to go to school. And she goes, she's getting my birth certificate for the first time. And she's like, how would you feel if your name was Adam Adams? Like, so I could take her maiden name. And I was 5. And so I was like, heck yeah. So I love it. In a way, I kind of had some say with that name, but my mom doesn't hate me. I promise you that much.
I think it's cool. In fact, if your middle name was Adam too, you'd be my hero.
Yeah, I tell people I lie sometimes and say it's Adam Adamson Adams. Mm-hmm. But it's Abel, like Cain and Abel.
Yeah, if my wife was here, she would hope it would be Adam Ant Adams. But that's
my stepdad, the one that I told you got me into real estate and investing and starting my own business, he always calls me Adam Ant.
Oh, I love it.
So Adam, it's a fascinating journey that you're on, and I always try to go back to our core audience, which is a parent or a student or a young person trying to make some sense of all of it. First of all, the recommendation on Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a classic. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I also am glad to hear that, you had both sides, the education side, what that went through, and you had your other dad who was kind of the entrepreneurial one. So you got to see both sides of that equation. My question revolves around a young person who's I don't even know if you have a good answer for this, but I'm going to throw it out here anyways. A young person is like TikTok, Instagram, those things, maybe YouTube. And I think they might ask the question, well, one, should I transition over to podcasting? Or maybe a better question is, what is the difference between them, and why is podcasting a platform that they might want to consider?
Well, I love the question, and I do have an answer, because podcasting certainly has its unique parts from things that are social media and from YouTube as well. Interesting, on YouTube, for example, and TikTok, you might put out, and Capri knows this, she's got a bunch of friends that do this as well. you might put out, let's say 100 posts, and most of them get like 30 likes, but one of them gets like 7 million likes. And that's the thing that happens on TikTok. And here's another interesting thing. Just because like on TikTok, you got 7 million people on one of your videos, but not on the others. And because a lot of people started following you, but they're not engaging on anything else, it doesn't really mean anything. You're not really an influencer when you're on YouTube and you have a couple that have millions and a bunch that have thousands. If you're on a podcast, it's a totally different world. And it's frustrating for some, you know, that want that TikTok experience. Like, I just need something to go viral, because you don't really have something that goes viral. You usually have something that's steady. And so you've got 100 downloads for every single episode. You got 300 downloads for every episode. You got 3,000 downloads for every single episode, or you have 30,000. I have one client, they have 120,000 for every single episode, but they don't have any that are 50, and they don't have any that are 70 million. It's just 120,000. And on my podcast, it's smallish. We're in the top 1%, but it's not a humongous audience. We're usually between 3,500 and around 6,000 per episode. So
that's huge.
It's all in that same area, right?
We are aspiring to that, Adam.
And the way to think about it is, on YouTube, when I go and view YouTube and TikTok, I scroll up, I scroll up, I scroll up, I pass it, I pass it, I pass it, and then I might stay on one for a few seconds. I might like it, and then I'll go to somebody else's channel again. Same thing on YouTube. When YouTube puts a video in front of somebody, it's because they think that that's something that person might be interested in. And while watching that video, they have a whole bunch of other videos underneath that says, watch this next. And none of them are of the same channel. Podcasting's different. When you're on podcast, you subscribe to a channel and you only have that channel in front of you at the same time. You're not having the podcast playing platform try to pull you away to everybody else's. So for the most part, people listen to every single episode. People call me and they hire me as a coach for podcasting all the time. And they say, I've listened to every single episode. And I'm like, how is that possible? There's almost 400 episodes. Like, how much time do you have? It took me years to put them out. Right. And you saying you're listening to all of them. Or they say that I've listened to 60 episodes in a row and now I'm ready to hire you. So on YouTube, the truth of the matter is there's only about 2-ish people that are on YouTube that I even know their name. One of them is Andrew Huberman. And there's only maybe one other person. I can't even think of their name now. It's so bad. But on YouTube, if I see something with Andrew Huberman, I'm going to probably watch it. But anything else, I may or may not recognize the face. I might watch it, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to like subscribe to their channel and just keep watching all of that stuff. But on podcasts, that's exactly how it works. You subscribe to a channel and then you get downloaded all of their stuff. And then you keep coming back every single week. So think of a podcast as a chapter book, and each episode is a new chapter. They're consecutive. They go with each other and they all speak to the exact same audience, and they're hooked until that podcast is over. And in many cases, that's hundreds or thousands of episodes. On YouTube, on TikTok, you're like, you're not, it's not working. It's not working. You make one that's big and now you think you're great, but the next one's small again. It can take a long time to actually get that traction on those other platforms because people don't follow people the same way that they do on a podcast. So what I love is I'm able to develop relationships with my clients so much that or my potential clients, I guess I should say, so much that when they call me to hire me, they're like starstruck, and I'm just a normal person. They're starstruck. They're, oh my gosh, I'm talking to the Adam Adams. This is so amazing. I never thought that I would do this. And I feel like I know you. And it takes you back because you're like, but I don't know you. How could you know me? It's because they've been having a personal conversation with me for dozens or hundreds of episodes. So that's why it's a little bit different. YouTube, you're going to maybe like 1 or 2 videos of somebody. Usually podcasting, you're going to subscribe to the channel and stay with it for a long, long time.
Got you. And I just had another follow-up question. I know we have to get out of here, but I guess the other follow-up question is for a young person or a parent who's thinking about going into it. You talked a little bit about you have a business where you're helping people. I'm just curious if you could comment on how the monetization of the platform works. How do they make money at that? And I'm sure you can't predict how long that takes, but if you have any guidelines in terms of this isn't like, I liked what you said about you might get 1 million and you might feel good about that on social media, but that's not necessarily a long-term strategy for monetizing that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how the monetization works for a podcast.
Yeah, well, good question. The monetization on a podcast is a little bit different from other things. So, with a podcast, there's 7-ish ways. And if you go to the podcast on podcasting, you'll be able to see, you could type in how to monetize and podcast on podcasting. I have some great episodes on that are like an hour long. But to give it quickly, there's a few ways to monetize. One of the ways is you can get advertisers or sponsors to pay you to talk about them on all of the shows or to put one of their ads on your shows. And that way it doesn't make quite as much. So I'm going to say 3 different ways to monetize. I'm going to go the lowest way to the highest way. The lowest is something called CPM. You don't have to know what that means, but it means cost per meal, which means cost per 1,000, because meal, MIL, is Latin, and or Spanish is very similar. So cost per 1,000 downloads. The 1,000 people that download this, I'm going to give you $30 per 1,000. And so that can be tough for some people because even a top 1% podcast only has 3,000.
Right.
And so you're going to make maybe $90 per episode. And if let's just say you're putting out 1 episode a week, that's not even $400 a month. So it's not a great way to monetize. I think most people on the call want to get to that place where they're making, 5 figures a month, probably. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be tough to do that with $400. The second way, the second out of the 3 that I'll share, there's 7, but the second one that's common is where you have people that you reach out to that can sponsor the show, that basically they serve the same avatar. I'll call your listener a listener avatar. It's the perfect listener. They also serve that person. And so they want to get in front of them. A good example is like a real estate agent has a podcast, and then a real estate lender. I think, Amy, you did a little bit of that. A lender might say, hey, we all serve these investors that are buying houses. So why don't I try to be in front of your people? And you're going to get a lot more than $30 or $20 CPM. You're going to be able to negotiate something with that lender where they say, hey, I'm going to give you $3,000 a month for the next 6 months to be part of your podcast, regardless of how many people you've got listening. And so that way you can make like $3,000 a month. The highest way goes back to being like an entrepreneur. And I'll be vulnerable and I'll share a stat from my podcast. Now I've had podcast clients that make a lot more than I do. I don't want to work so much. I only want to work 4 hours a week. So that's what I do. But I have had podcast clients that are making like $1 million or more in a year because of their podcast. On my podcast, we bring in $45,000 a month through the podcast, and we do it by selling our own product or service. So this is the one that I think is the best, but you should be an entrepreneur for that. You should be having your own, you might be a coach or a consultant or an attorney. And there's some other categories where you can do that. For me, I serve people by helping them start a podcast, grow a podcast, and we do all the work for their podcast. So they just push record and we do the rest. And so with that, we get a client or 2 each month, and we have high-ish ticket prices for some of the things that we offer. And so we're able to attribute out of the gross revenue that we make at the company, $45,000 comes each month, comes directly from the podcast. So for me, I would way rather sell my own stuff than get $30 for a CPM model for somebody who doesn't really fit my avatar, or $3,000 a month from somebody who fits my avatar. I would rather just sell my own stuff, grow my own business that way. So there's many other ways you could go to the Podcast on Podcasting to get more info on it. But those are the 3 ways that I see most people monetizing a podcast.
Isn't that great? Didn't he answer so many questions today? For all of our listeners, now you just heard it. Adam Adams just dropped the bomb and said, this is what it takes, is what you do. And what I loved is how you also keyed in on the consistency. We were just discussing that before you came on, Adam. I was saying to Capri, I'm so excited. We really have had that consistency. We're booked the rest of the year. We'll go into season 3. We are going to keep doing what we're doing ongoing because that consistency pays off.
I love it. That was fantastic, Adam. Appreciate it. How about we wrap this bad boy up so we can let Adam get back to his life and his kids?
Adam, we really appreciate you today.
4-hour week work week.
I know, right?
So listen, on behalf of my co-hosts, Amy and Capri, my name is Ed, and we really want to thank Adam for showing up. Adam Adams, I love that name, for being our guest and talking about the life in the podcast world. Listen, this podcast for us is truly a passion project. So when we talk about education, career, and beyond, that's because we want to make sure we're communicating with young people and adults who are trying to understand the way of business, podcasts in this situation, or, you know, just being open to hearing about how you can grow a business and hearing other people's experiences. Or maybe you're in school and you're trying to figure out what to do when you get out. Either way, the podcast is fantastic. And if you listen to this one and you like it, just give us a thumbs up. If you think somebody else would enjoy it, because we know they would, make sure you share it. And we do one of these every single week. So go ahead and subscribe so you can get this delivered right to your email box, or join us on one of the podcast channels. You can check it out. That was our episode. It was another great one. We'll see you next time.